This is one of those moments where you pause, stare at the screen, and realize something big just shifted. Not loudly, not with sirens, but quietly enough that a lot of people are about to miss it. Because what just happened isn't a headline. It's a signal. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with something most people overlook. Canada didn't suddenly fall into trouble overnight. This moment has been building for years, layer by layer, decision by decision, until one comment from Donald Trump pulled the curtain back and made everything painfully obvious. When Trump says the United States doesn't need the USMCA deal anymore, that isn't just rhetoric, it's leverage. It's a businessman telling the other side, very calmly, that the table has shifted and the cards they're holding aren't worth what they think they are. And here's where things get interesting. The reaction in Ottawa wasn't confidence, it wasn't urgency, it was confusion. And that tells you everything you need to know. In my view, this is the moment Canada's leadership expected someone else to blink and realized the blink wasn't coming. For context, the USMCA, the trade agreement replacing NAFTA, was always more important to Canada than it was to the United States. Roughly 3/4 of Canada's exports go south of the border. The U.S., by contrast, has far more diversified options.
Canada. I don't even think about USMCA. I mean, I want to see Canada and Mexico do well, but the problem is we don't need their product. We don't need cars made in Canada. We don't need cars made in Mexico. We want to make them here. And that's what's happening. Everybody's moving here. From Canada, they're coming here. From Mexico, from Japan, from Germany, from all over the world, they're coming here. They're opening up their plants. Bill is lucky because he's had a lot here, but when he doesn't have it here, he's moving here. They're doing big expansions for it. But they're all doing great. The car industry is exciting, and to be honest with you, Bill, every industry is exciting. Yeah.
That imbalance matters, especially when the person on the other side of the table thinks in terms of pressure, not diplomacy. Donald Trump has been consistent about this for years. He's said it publicly, repeatedly. Canada imposes heavy tariffs on dairy. Lumber has been a constant fight. Auto manufacturing has long been something he wants pulled back into American states like Michigan and Ohio. None of this is new. What's new is that he's no longer pretending Canada has equal leverage. Here's the part most people misunderstand. This isn't about whether Trump is right or wrong. It's about how power works in negotiations. Trump approaches trade the same way he approaches real estate or contracts. If you need the deal more than I do, you're already on the back foot. And that brings us to Mark Carney. Carney has built his reputation as a steady hand, a central banker, an institutional figure, someone fluent in global finance. That works well in boardrooms. It works well at conferences. It does not automatically translate to negotiating with someone whose entire strategy is disruption. When Carney positioned himself as the person who could handle Trump, expectations went up fast. But instead of heading south to reset the relationship early, Canada drifted. By the time pressure started building, the options were already narrowing. Now here's the twist. Instead of focusing entirely on Washington, Carney makes a high-profile visit to China. On paper, it's about repairing trade ties. In reality, it sends a signal, intentional or not, that Canada is looking for alternatives. And that matters, because from the American perspective, China isn't just another trading partner. It's the strategic rival. Trump has made that crystal clear. So when Canada flirts with Beijing while its most important trade relationship is under strain, it complicates everything. Some commentators argue this was about diversification. Others think it was desperation. From the reactions I've seen online, a lot of Canadians simply asked the same question. Why are we strengthening ties elsewhere while the foundation under our feet is cracking? This is where the tension really comes from. Because while Ottawa plays geopolitics, provinces like Alberta are staring at something far more immediate, their livelihoods. Alberta's economy depends heavily on energy, exports, and regulatory stability. For years, many Albertans have felt boxed in by federal policy, underrepresented in Ottawa, and sidelined in national decision-making. That frustration didn't start with Trump, and it didn't start with Carney. But moments like this pour gasoline on it. When Alberta Premier Danielle Smith talks about a national unity crisis, that's not abstract language. It's a warning. Separatist sentiment doesn't explode out of nowhere. It builds when people feel ignored, talked down to, or economically cornered. And you can see it online. People lining up to sign petitions. Comment sections splitting into camps. Accusations flying in every direction. Some calling it treason. Others calling it survival. The tone should worry anyone who cares about cohesion, because it feels eerily familiar to past moments when the country fractured emotionally long before it fractured politically. What makes this different is the timing. Back in the 1990s, during Quebec's referendum era, the federal government scrambled to keep the country together. There were public appeals, emotional messaging, a sense that unity mattered. Today, when Western provinces raise similar alarms, the response feels colder, dismissive, even mocking in some circles. That contrast isn't lost on people watching from the outside. Meanwhile, Trump keeps doing what Trump does. He talks about economic force, not military force. He talks about manufacturing jobs coming home. He talks about trade deficits like leaks in a sinking ship. And whether you like him or not, the consistency matters. Markets respond to consistency. Businesses respond to it. Governments eventually are forced to respond to it. This fact changes the whole perspective. Trump doesn't need to annex anything to get what he wants. Economic pressure does the work for him. Tariffs, incentives, regulatory shifts, these are quieter tools, but often far more effective. That's why auto manufacturing keeps coming up. The United States wants those plants. It wants the jobs. It wants the supply chains within its borders. If you've ever watched documentaries about places like Flint, Michigan, you understand why that message resonates domestically. Canada, by contrast, is stuck defending industries without clearly articulating what it's offering in return. In my opinion, that's the biggest failure here. Negotiation isn't about standing tall and refusing to budge. It's about finding leverage where you still have it. Energy could have been that leverage. Regulatory reform could have been part of it. Tariff concessions could have been negotiated. Instead, Canada waited. And waiting is expensive. As this plays out, provinces are responding based on their own interests. Doug Ford focuses on Ontario's auto sector, as premiers tend to do. Saskatchewan looks at agriculture. Alberta looks at energy and autonomy. None of that is shocking. What's shocking is how little coordination there appears to be at the federal level to pull those interests into a single strategy. And that's why people are scared. Not because of one comment from Trump, not because of one trip to China, but because it feels like the country is reacting instead of leading. Here's why this part hits differently. When people start saying, we just want to work, pay our bills, and plan for the future, that's not ideology. That's anxiety. That's families watching housing costs, food prices, and job security all wobble at once. Political arguments don't land the same way when people feel economically cornered. That's where the talk of separation stops being theoretical and starts being emotional. It's less about flags and borders and more about control over resources, policy, and economic destiny. If Canada were a ship, this wouldn't feel like hitting an iceberg. It would feel like realizing the hull has been cracked for a while, and the water is already inside. The lifeboats aren't full yet, but people are starting to look for them. And through all of this, Trump remains exactly what he's always been, transactional. Nothing personal, just business. That phrase explains more than any press conference ever could. He's playing for American advantage. Full stop. The real question isn't whether he's being harsh. The real question is whether Canada has leadership prepared to play the same game, with the same clarity. Because if it doesn't, the pressure won't ease. It'll compound. From where I'm sitting, this moment isn't about panic. It's about honesty. Honest conversations about trade dependence. Honest conversations about representation. Honest conversations about what unity actually requires when economic realities start pulling regions apart. Ignoring it won't make it go away. I'm curious how you're reading this moment. Does this feel like a turning point or just another scare that fades? Do you think provinces are justified in pushing back harder, or does that risk making things worse? If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing. I appreciate you.